Hap.
Hello.
So we are here with Hap May and his legal play. Today, Hap, we're talking about tax matters.
Tax matters and politics, really, when you get down to it.
Yes, and specifically we're talking about certain provisions that will be sunsetting in the
Current tax law,
2017.
which was, that comes out of the 2017 Tax Act, referred to as the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, sometimes referred to as, the Trump tax bill or something to that effect, the Trump taxes.
Okay.
In the process, passed early in the Trump administration, did some things to minimize corporate taxes, took away and then I guess increased the estate and gift tax exemption.
Okay.
In the process, also created some things called opportunity zones, which gave light to some investments and some certain targeted investment loans, took away some of the itemized deductions, state and local tax limits were limited. Casualty losses were limited only to federally declared disaster areas. The theft loss was eliminated as a casualty loss, and a host of other things.
I was about to say that sounds like a lot already.
It was one of those major tax bills that changed the landscape of taxes and the way government's funded.
Okay, so why are we here talking about it today?
Well, many of the provisions, in fact, most of the provisions are not permanent. They are set to expire December 31st, 2025. Meaning for those provisions, if Congress does not take any action to change or otherwise alter the 2016 law, we will revert back to what the law was in 2016. This has become a particular concern for people doing estate planning, because right now the estate tax is something like $12 million. It changes every year based on inflation, but it's roughly about $12 million for an individual, $24 million for a married couple. That will revert back to something like $7 million if Congress doesn't do anything within the next year, or next year and a half, actually, before December 31st, 2025. So that could be a major issue for people trying to do estate planning who have a significant amount of wealth.
Okay, so, and we had talked a little bit about this earlier, and my question was, okay, well, what might happen with this upcoming election if it's the Trump Tax Act? If he gets elected, if he's in office again, is this a sure thing that these provisions will continue?
I don't know that that's a sure thing, because I have to also know what Congress is. I mean, again, in order for assuming that it's as simple as the Trump tax cuts are extended, that would require both the House and the Senate to pass a bill that says that and a president to sign that. If in fact Trump is reelected and there are majority Republicans in both the House and the Senate, I think something like that would be probable.
Well, so if Trump isn't elected, or there isn't a majority
isn't elected, or there is a Democrats House one or both houses of Congress,
is it likely it'll revert, that a lot of these provisions would change?
I would think and hope that they would get together in some sort of compromise tax bill. We would see a new tax bill come out in the process, but who knows? I mean, that's a divided Congress where the president's one party and Congress is another is a good formula for doing nothing, and doing nothing would revert us back to 2016. There are probably some people that argue that's what we should do. I mean, I'm not necessarily one of them, but there is a different burden that taxes would fall upon, and some people might argue what we had in 2016 is better than what we have now. So there may be some people who are intentionally not going to renew this thing in the process.
Well, without knowing the political sphere coming up and what is going to be discussed and voted in, or what's going to change or not change, without knowing any of that, then what can people be doing now if they're doing estate planning?
Well, if they're doing estate planning and they have significant amount of wealth, such that the fact that they could in fact or anticipate being able to distribute to their heirs, and not there's and I'll get into the difference between spouses and charities and heirs here in a minute. But if they want to give away more than $12 million or to say their children, they want to give more than, I guess, $7 million to their
Right.
children. They want to give $12 million to their children. Married couple, $24 million to the children. And so we're talking about a small sector of the population, but those who are those who are would be legitimately concerned about what happens with the tax bill and the tax exemption. So they may have an opportunity between now and then to effectively give away 12 or $24 million to their children. There's a way they can do it in trust and have some, it's a little complicated, but the way you do a trust, they basically have to give the children some present interest in the thing, but it can be done in a way that, but it has to be done irrevocably and not so the parents could ever get that money back in the process. So they have basically, a year, a little less than a year and a half to do that. I suppose some people will probably take the strategy, let's figure out what we would have to do and then see what happens in the presidential election, and then have from whatever November 6th or whatever the election date is until December 31st to actually put something in action. I would think it would be difficult for some of these people who have relatively complex estates to wait until the presidential election and then say, oh my gosh, I better do something, and not have a plan in place in the process.
Well, I mean, is there a way to do it that you can set out your plan that would have the same effect as no matter what, like no matter what the estate tax, is going to be, what the rules are going to be, your money is going to go eventually where you want it to go.
Well, but are you retaining it though? Is it still your, if you have not given away, let's say you do not give away to what you have $12 million, you haven't given it away, and you die, and if Congress does nothing and you die in January of 2016, only $7 million of that is going to be exempt. And your estate would have to pay tax on the $5 million. Compare that to if you die December 31st, 2025 and have $12 million, the whole thing's exempt. Not that I'm encouraging people to die early necessarily, but I mean that's kind of the reality of what we are. Depending on when you die, what the tax law is at the time you die will affect, how much your heirs get, because some of it's going to be taxed. Now, to go through the whole rules, money I leave to my spouse is not taxed until my spouse dies.
Right.
Money I give to charity is effectively not taxed because it's taxed, it's included in the estate, but you get a deduction for the amount of charitable contributions you make. There are also certain, and this may get beyond the scope of this podcast, but there are certain discounts you can take for lack of marketability, depending what your assets are, for the lack of marketability of your assets and for the lack of control. So if you had a family limited partnership where the estate does not have control and it has invested in, say, real estate assets that are in there are certain discounts you can take, which would be true either before or after. But the idea would be to kind of squeeze down that value and give away, $12 million. But if we could take $15 million of assets, take some discounts, again, for lack of marketability, lack of control, some other discounts, and get that down and then distribute that out, we're doing some serious work to, try to limit the amount of taxes that would be generated upon the death of dad or granddad or whoever it is that's making the distributions.
This seems, some of what you're saying seems like it would take some work, some planning, some drafting to make sure it all happens according to, an intended plan.
An intended plan with distributions that qualify for the exemption. and done timely so that they happen before whatever the deadline, whatever the tax law change is, which is December 31st, 2025, unless something changes. So yeah, it does take some planning. And I mean, it's if somebody's got, cash in their, $12 million worth of cash in their mattress, it may take less than if they have a closely held business, complicated real estate, or oil and gas interest or stock market interest or something like that. So the makeup of the estate adds a layer of complexity to it. But it's something that at least people that are in that, range of wealth need to be thinking about as we approach the election. Because and I've had calls on it. I mean, that's and everybody's kind of, well, what do I do? I told them basically have this same conversation with them. And, some of them say, yeah, let's do that. Others say, well, I don't want to give up control of my, $12 million. And it's really just $12 million. There are some issues there because you don't want dad to irrevocably give away $12 million to be a pauper.
Fair enough.
That's not what, but
I guess everybody's situation is different.
yes.
Okay.
Yes. And that's probably the biggest change in the tax law that would occur if no new tax bill comes through that people seem to be talking about.
Well, at least that we can do something about now without knowing how it's all going to play out in the future.
That's true too.
But this is something that at least we have some control over,
right?
No matter what happens.
We will have some discussions next year about whether people should make investments in opportunity zones, because that may go away. And that's got some distinct advantages, again, beyond the scope of this. Also, to the extent we have state and local taxes that may become deductible, that are limited or eliminated now, we may want to wait until 2026 to actually make those payments. And there's a host of tax planning that we will be discussing between now and either the end of 2025 or until we actually get a tax bill coming out of Congress in 2025.
Okay.
In the process. So that's kind of the purpose of this, is to kind of let everybody know that not so much to make a decision on the election, but to understand that there is an election, there is a process by which we pass tax legislation in the state in the United States. And that 2025 may be a very, very interesting year in the tax law world, and the political / tax professionals are going to be watching what happens, and taxpayers are going to need to be able to react.
Okay. Well, that was good information.
All right. Well, this is Hap May with a Legal Play.
Thanks, Hap.